blood crusted in her curls. Cold mud soaked through my knees. Her breath rattled, thin and broken, while the forest watched in silence. I dropped beside her, afraid to touch, counting seconds like heartbeats, tasting iron and wet leaves. My name is Helen Brooks. I was 55 years old when I found my daughter beaten and left to die in the woods. The woman who did it wasn't a stranger. She was family. She believed our blood was something to erase, something disposable, something she could bury without consequence. I lifted my jacket, pressed it to the bleeding, and listened for a sound that meant life. Sirens were far away. Help was never coming fast enough. In that moment, fear hardened into something colder. But what they didn't know was, before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. A small town, a quiet apartment, somewhere you never thought something like this could happen. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Not by strangers, but by the people who were supposed to protect you. This isn't just a story about violence. It's about silence. About what happens when cruelty hides behind respectability. Stay with me, because what happened next wasn't loud or dramatic. It was slow, calculated, and it changed everything. I didn't always understand why silence came so easily to me. Growing up, I learned early that silence could be armor. It could keep you safe. It could help you survive rooms where your presence was tolerated but never fully welcomed. I was born in a county where people smiled politely but counted your differences like debts you'd never finish paying. My skin, my last name, my family history, none of it fit neatly into the picture they preferred. My grandparents were the first to teach me that love could be an act of defiance. My grandfather, Samuel Brooks, was a white man from a farming family who came back from the war quieter than when he left. My grandmother, Ruth Brooks, was a black woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper sense of dignity. They married when it was still whispered about in church basements and grocery aisles. They lost friends. They lost family. What they didn't lose was each other. I remember their house as a place that smelled like wood smoke and coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. Grandpa taught me how to tie knots, how to read the weather, how to keep calm when things went wrong. Grandma taught me how to stand still when people tried to push me into smaller spaces. She never raised her voice. She never begged to be understood. She carried herself like she knew something everyone else didn't. I didn't know it back then. But that quiet strength would become the only inheritance that truly mattered. When I became a nurse, it felt natural. Hospitals are places where life and death exist side by side, and I'd been trained for that kind of tension since childhood. I worked night shifts, weekend shifts, holidays. I learned how to read fear in a patient's eyes and how to keep my hands steady when everything inside wanted to shake. People thought I was calm. What I really was practiced. Lena was born during a thunderstorm in late spring. I remember the rain hitting the hospital windows like it was trying to get inside. She came into the world screaming, angry, alive, dark curls, strong lungs, a grip that wrapped around my finger like she wasn't planning to let go anytime soon. From the start, she was different from me, louder, braver, less willing to disappear. Raising her alone wasn't easy, but it was honest. We lived in a small wooden house on the edge of town. The floors creaked. The heater complained every winter, but it was ours. I worked long hours and came home tired, but I never let her see how heavy things felt. We ate dinner at the same table every night, even if it was just soup and bread. Routine was my way of telling her she was safe. When Lena was a teenager, I started to notice how people looked at her, not just boys, but adults. Teachers praised her too much or not at all. Strangers commented on her looks in ways that felt wrong. She was beautiful in a way that made some people uncomfortable, confident, curious, unafraid to ask questions. I didn't know it back then, but beauty mixed with intelligence makes some families feel threatened. She met Ethan Hale at a charity fundraiser during her final year of college. He was polite, well-dressed, and spoke softly, like he was afraid of taking up too much space. His family owned half the commercial properties downtown. His mother chaired galas and charity boards. His father's name was attached to buildings and scholarships. On paper, he was perfect. I remember the first dinner at their house. The chandelier was so bright it made my eyes hurt. Margaret Hale kissed my cheek without warmth and looked me up and down like she was checking for stains. She spoke slowly to me, enunciating every word, as if volume and clarity were the same thing. When Lena announced she and Ethan were engaged, Margaret smiled and said nothing. That silence felt heavier than an insult. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. The wedding was lavish. Too lavish. White roses, string quartets, cameras everywhere. Lena looked stunning, but when she hugged me before walking down the aisle, her hands were cold. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself love would soften everything. It didn't. Marriage changed Lena in small ways at first. She stopped calling as often. When she did, she spoke carefully, like someone was always listening. Her laughter sounded practiced. She said she was busy, tired, adjusting. I believed her because believing felt easier than admitting I might be losing her. Then came the first pregnancy. She called me crying late one night, whispering like she didn't want to be overheard. She'd lost the baby. The doctors said stress, hormones, bad luck. Margaret sent flowers with a card that said rest is important. Avoid unnecessary strain. Ethan didn't come to the phone. I sat on my kitchen floor after that call, holding the phone long after the line went dead. I told myself I should have seen something, should have asked harder questions. That guilt stayed with me like a bruise you stop noticing until someone presses on it. After the miscarriage, Lena tried harder. She worked more, smiled more. She learned to blend into the background of her own marriage. I could hear it in her voice, that careful tone, the one I'd mastered years ago, the one that keeps you alive but costs you pieces of yourself. I didn't know it back then, but she was being slowly erased. Margaret controlled everything without ever raising her voice. Money, appearances, schedules. Ethan deferred to her on every decision. What school would be best for future grandchildren? What diet was appropriate? What kind of woman fit the Hale legacy? Lena told me once, joking, that she felt like a guest in her own house. I laughed with her, but something twisted in my chest. The second pregnancy came quietly. Lena didn't tell anyone at first, not even me. When she finally did, her voice shook. She was afraid to hope, afraid to attach, afraid her body would fail her again. That fear wasn't accidental. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. The headaches she brushed off, the nausea that didn't feel normal, the way Margaret insisted on preparing her meals, the herbal teas, the supplements. I didn't know it then. But danger doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives with a smile and a teacup. When Lena disappeared for 2 days, I told myself she was busy. When her phone went straight to voicemail, I told myself reception was bad. I had spent a lifetime telling myself stories that made fear manageable. Then the call came. A local man, the woods near the old quarry, my daughter barely alive. Everything I thought I knew about silence shattered in that moment. And as I drove down that dirt road, tires slipping, heart pounding, one truth burned through every other thought. This wasn't random. This was personal. The day I found Lena, the air tasted like wet leaves and metal. The call came while I was paying for chicken feed. A man asked if I was Helen Brooks and said he'd found my daughter near the old quarry, alive, but barely. The fluorescent lights above the counter buzzed, and I remember how my hearing sharpened like something inside me had snapped awake. I didn't know it then, but the drive north would erase the version of me that still believed good families stay safe. The county road thinned into a muddy track. My tires slipped in ruts. I drove the way I used to move through triage, fast but focused, because panic wastes time and blood doesn't. Tom Weaver stood by a battered pickup, shoulders hunched, face gray. He pointed toward the trees and said he'd left a thermos and a jacket with her. He kept glancing down the road, like trouble had a schedule. I pushed into the brush. When I saw Lena, my lungs forgot their job. She was curled on her side, coat ripped, hair tangled with dirt. Her face was swollen in a way that didn't happen from a fall. It happened from hands. I didn't know it then, but I was done worrying about what was proper. I knelt beside her. Her skin was cold, her breathing scraped. I whispered her name and she opened one eye, just a slit. I lifted the thermos and she managed to sip, then coughed, lip split, voice barely there. I asked who did it. My voice came out flat. That calm I learned in hospital hallways where families fall apart if you sound scared. She swallowed and whispered, "Margaret Hale." The name didn't fit the dirt and blood in front of me. Margaret Hale was charity speeches and camera smiles. The woman who once looked at my hands and asked if I still did nursing. My rage didn't flare hot. It dropped cold and certain. Lena squeezed my fingers and whispered, Margaret called her dirty blood, like it was a stain that could be scrubbed out. I didn't know it then. But those words would hit every quiet insult I'd swallowed for 55 years. Sirens were faint in the distance. The safe thing was the hospital. But Lena rasped, "No, not there." She said the Hales had people everywhere. She said Ethan would walk in with his mother and act concerned, and I'd be the hysterical outsider. I asked what started it. Lena forced the story out in broken pieces. She said she opened a safe at home and found files from Margaret's charity foundation. Transfers, shell companies, amounts too big, descriptions too vague. She took photos on her phone and asked Margaret about it. Margaret offered a drive out of town to talk privately. Then Lena said she was pregnant. 12 weeks. She hadn't told me yet because she was scared to hope again. My throat tightened. I thought about the first pregnancy 2 years earlier. The one everyone blamed on stress. The one Lena blamed on herself. I didn't know it then, but my guilt was about to turn into something sharper. Tom didn't question me when I said I was taking her. He nodded once and walked toward the flashing lights to intercept the ambulance. I got Lena to my car inch by inch and buckled her in, careful around her wrist that hung wrong. I drove home without looking back. In my living room, I cleaned her wounds, wrapped bruised skin, and splinted her wrist with a board from the mudroom. The smell of antiseptic filled the house. Lena stared at the ceiling like the plaster might repeat what she'd confessed. Her phone was in her bag. Cracked screen, still working. I scrolled through photos of documents, numbers, signatures, Lena whispered. The same company names kept showing up. Always paid for consulting. Always tied to empty addresses. Then she went quiet and said, "Ethan knew." I asked what she meant. Lena's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She said during her first pregnancy, Ethan caught Margaret slipping something into her tea. He confronted her. Margaret told him it was for the family, for the legacy, for keeping the line clean. And Ethan chose silence over his wife and child. Lena looked at me like she expected me to blame her for marrying him. The shame on her face hurt worse than the bruises. I didn't know it then. But the real wound wasn't just violence. It was betrayal with a calm face. I crawled under my car with a flashlight. A small black box was wired near the rear axle, a tracker. All those times Ethan insisted on helping with my Chevy, sending it to his mechanic, checking my tires. It wasn't care. It was a leash. I ripped it off and set it on the kitchen table beside Lena's phone. Proof we'd been watched and managed like property. I called my brother Caleb from a burner number I kept for storms. He picked up on the second ring. I told him Lena was hurt, that Margaret Hale did it, that Ethan had known more than he admitted. I said, "Remember what Grandpa Samuel taught us?" Caleb went quiet. Then his voice turned steady. He said he was coming. He told me to turn off our phones and pack only what mattered. Then he said, "You're not alone. Healin'. Not this time." I didn't know it then, but those words would keep me upright when the night started pressing in. Lena drifted in and out of sleep, one hand protective over her belly even when she was unconscious. The wind scraped branches against the windows. Every creak sounded like a footstep. When headlights swept across my curtains, I was already at the door. Caleb came in with that old soldier quiet, eyes scanning corners out of habit. He took one look at Lena and his jaw tightened. Then he looked at the tracker on my table. "We can't stay here," he said. "Too exposed." He reminded me of Grandpa Samuel's hunting cabin deep in the woods, the one with no address and no neighbors. He said it was the kind of place people forget exists. He also said he had a doctor friend, Aaron Mills, who'd patch Lena up without a paper trail. While Caleb checked the windows, I moved through my house, grabbing what mattered: gauze, pain meds safe for pregnancy, a thermos, 2 quilts, Lena's charger, the folder of photos saved to a spare drive. I turned my phone off and pulled the battery, like Grandpa once showed us. Lena watched me with wet eyes, whispering she was sorry. I told her to save her breath. We were leaving before dawn. No lights. No questions. I looked at my daughter, bruised and breathing, and I nodded, because by then, I finally understood the truth I'd avoided my whole life. If you wait for the world to be fair, you'll bury the people you love. The first night after I brought Lena home, my house stopped feeling like my house. It became a place people could take from us. The stove ticked as it warmed. Rain tapped the kitchen window like fingernails. Lena lay on my couch, wrapped in quilts that still smelled like laundry soap and cedar. Her coat, the one that used to look expensive and untouchable, sat in a trash bag by the door, stiff with mud. I couldn't stop staring at the bruises climbing her neck like fingerprints. I set a bowl of broth on the coffee table. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. 30 years in a rural hospital teaches you how to move through panic without showing it. "Drink a little," I said. Lena tried. Her lip trembled. She swallowed and hissed through her teeth. "Mom," she whispered, like the word itself hurt. "I'm right here." She closed her eyes. Then they popped open again, wide and terrified. "They'll come." That was the first mini-drama. Not the beating, not the blood. The certainty in her voice, the kind that doesn't come from imagination. It comes from history. I crouched beside her. "Who will come?" She stared past me, like she could already see headlights in my yard. "Margaret," she said, "and Ethan will let her." My stomach tightened, not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. I stood and checked the locks. Front door, back door, the old window latch that never fully caught. I pushed it down until my thumb ached. Caleb called 10 minutes later. 1 ring, 2. I picked up. "It's me." His voice was low. "Don't say names." "Okay. Is she alive?" "Yes." "Good. Turn off your phones after this. They can track them." I looked at my kitchen table, at the little pile of things I'd torn from my old life in the last few hours. Bandages, antiseptic, pain meds, Lena's cracked phone, face down like it was ashamed. "We didn't go to the hospital," I said. A pause. Then, "Smart." I didn't feel smart. I felt like I'd just stolen my own child from a system that was supposed to protect her. Caleb kept talking. "I'm on my way. Dawn at the latest. Don't call the cops. Don't call your friends. Don't call church. Nobody." I swallowed. "What do I do until you get here?" "Stay quiet. Stay ready." The line went dead. The second mini-drama happened in my driveway. Lena had warned me, and I didn't know it back then. But warning and proof are 2 different animals. I stepped outside with a flashlight. The cold biting through my sweater. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled like wet leaves and gasoline. My old car sat crooked, the way it always did when I parked too fast. I crouched by the driver's side and aimed the light under the frame. There it was, a small black box, tucked clean against the metal like it belonged there. My throat went dry. I reached for it anyway. My fingers found tape, then a magnet. I yanked. Too hard. It came off with a soft snap. Tracker. I stood up so fast the porch steps blurred. For a second, the world tilted. Not from dizziness, from anger. Inside, Lena watched me from the couch. Her eyes tracked my hands. "You found it," she said. "You knew." Her jaw clenched. "Gavin insisted on fixing your car a few months ago. He took it to their shop. He said he wanted you safe. I almost laughed. Nothing came out. I set the tracker on the kitchen table. It blinked red. Steady. Calm. Like it had all the time in the world. The third mini-drama wasn't loud. It was quiet and cruel. Lena pulled her cracked phone toward her with her good hand. I took pictures, she said, from the foundation files. My heart thumped once. You have proof. She nodded. Then her face collapsed for half a second. And I have something else, she whispered. Something I didn't tell you because I thought it was my fault. I sat down, slow, careful, like I was approaching a patient who might bolt. What? I said. Her eyes shone, glassy and furious. The miscarriage, she said. 2 years ago, I thought it was stress. I thought it was me. My chest tightened. She fed me something. Lena continued. Margaret. Little pills. Powder and tea. She called them vitamins. Ethan knew she was giving me something. He joked about it. Like it was nothing. I couldn't breathe for a beat. Not because I didn't understand. Because I did. My whole life. I'd learned to swallow insults to survive. To keep my voice soft. To let people treat my blood like it was a stain and pretend it didn't burn. But this was different. This wasn't just hatred. This was calculated harm. I looked at my daughter, bruised and pregnant, and still trying to apologize for being hurt. Something in me went cold. I picked up the tracker again. The red light blinked against my palm, like a heartbeat that wasn't ours. Outside, far down the road, a car door slammed. Not close enough to see, close enough to hear. I didn't know it then. But that sound was the beginning of the hunt. By sunrise, the air inside my house tasted like metal. Smoke from the stove clung to the curtains. Lena slept in short, shallow bursts, jerking awake whenever the floorboards creaked. Even when it was only the old house settling, Caleb arrived at 6, 12 a.m. His truck rolled in without headlights, a dark shape easing through my yard like a trained animal. He knocked once, 2 quick taps, then nothing. I opened the door. He stepped in, towel, broad, rain jacket dripping. His eyes went straight to Lena, then to the tracker on my table. You found it, he said. I ripped it off the frame. He nodded. Good. Lena tried to sit up. Uncle Caleb. He crouched beside her, voice low. Hey, kiddo, you did right calling your mom. Her mouth twitched. I didn't call. A hunter found me. Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked at me. We can't stay. I heard myself say, they already think we're staying. He glanced toward the window. Then we make them believe it longer. Lena's phone was still off. Battery out. But she'd copied the photos to a tiny flash drive on her keychain. When Caleb plugged it into his laptop, the screen filled with transfers and company names that sounded fake because they were Consulting Group LLC, Evergreen Analysis, Cedar Ridge Services, Shells, Caleb muttered. Laundry, Lena swallowed. It's the Hopewell Foundation, Margaret's foundation, in our county. Hopewell paid for wheelchairs and chemo rides. People clapped for Margaret like she was a saint. I stared at the screen and felt my stomach drop. Caleb scrolled fast. This is big money. Lena's voice went thin. She told me I should be grateful she let me marry in. Then she said my blood would ruin their name. My throat went dry. I didn't know it back then. But that sentence would become the match that lit everything. Caleb shut the laptop. We moved to Grandpa Sam's cabin. I hesitated. Lena can't walk that far. We drive as far as we can, he said. Then we carry her. Lena flinched. If they find us in the woods, they won't. Caleb cut in. Not if we stop acting like prey. He set 3 burner phones on the table. New numbers. No names. No contacts. I picked one up. It felt too light for what we were about to do. While Caleb packed supplies, I sat on the edge of the couch and watched Lena drink water. Her bruises had shifted overnight. Purple, bleeding into sick green. She looked younger than 31 in that moment. Like a kid pretending not to be scared. I should have seen it, I whispered. Lena blinked slowly. Mom, don't. I'm supposed to protect you. I said, Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. You found me. I swallowed hard. I mean before. When you moved into that mansion, when you stopped calling. Lena looked away. I wanted you to believe it. I wanted it to be true. That sentence hit like a bruise blooming inside my chest. I didn't know it then, but it would matter later. When someone tried to tell her she should forgive, then came the knock. Not the safe knock Caleb used. Not the neighborly knock you answer with a smile. This was firm, impatient, like someone who owned the door. Caleb froze. His hand went to his jacket pocket. The knock came again. A woman's voice, bright and practiced, floated through the wood. Helen, it's Margaret. We need to talk. Lena's face drained. She grabbed my wrist with a shaking hand. She found us. Caleb leaned close and whispered, Don't move. Don't answer. Margaret laughed softly on the porch. I know you're in there. Ethan told me you brought her home. He always tells me everything. My burner phone buzzed in Caleb's palm. One text. Unknown number, bring her back. Mom can fix this. Ethan. No apology. No fear for his unborn child. Just obedience. Lena read it and her face went blank. Like something inside her cracked. Margaret's tone sharpened. Open the door. Helen. This doesn't have to get ugly. Caleb's mouth tightened. He mouthed one word at me. Now. I reached for the tracker, still blinking red, and slipped it into a metal cookie tin. My hands were steady. My heart was not. Caleb lifted Lena carefully, like she was both fragile and priceless. She bit down on a sob. Margaret knocked again. Harder. Don't make me call the sheriff, Caleb whispered. Back window. We moved through my house like ghosts, stepping where the boards wouldn't squeal, holding our breath between sounds. Outside. Margaret kept talking, sweet as poison. Behind us, her heels clicked on porch, and I realized she wasn't alone out there. Your daughter is confused, she called. And you don't want to lose what little piece you have left. When we slipped out into the cold morning and the woods swallowed us, I didn't feel peace. I felt a promise forming, and I knew the next time I faced Margaret Hale, it wouldn't be from behind a locked door. The old pine diner smelled like burnt coffee and bleach. Neon from the open sign pulsed in the front window, turning every face a little sickly, a little unreal. The booths were worn vinyl. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, threatening snow. Caleb walked in first, shoulders loose like he was just hungry. I followed 2 steps behind, my briefcase pressed tight against my ribs. The burner phone was in my coat pocket. Warm from my palm. Richard Hale was already there. Corner booth. Back wall. A man built like a courthouse. Silver hair. Expensive watch. Hands folded like prayer but not for forgiveness. A cup of black coffee sat untouched. He didn't look surprised to see us. That chilled me. I noted the exits without thinking. Front door. Kitchen swing door. Side window with a cracked latch. Old nurse habit. In trauma, you count what can kill you and what can save you. I didn't know it then, but I was already planning escape. Caleb slid into the booth opposite him without asking. I sat beside my brother. Somewhere near the register, a waitress dropped silverware into a tray and the clatter made me flinch. Richard's eyes moved over me, quick and assessing. Mrs. Brooks, he said. Helen. I answered. Use my name. You have 10 minutes, he said. I have a flight. Caleb leaned forward. Then listen. Richard's gaze flicked to the briefcase. You claim my wife assaulted my daughter-in-law. I opened the case and laid out the first photo. Lena's swollen face, the split lip, the bruises blooming along her collarbone like fingerprints. I watched Richard's pupils tighten. Tiny. Real. That's not a claim. I said, that's what she did. Richard didn't touch the photo. Where is Lena? Safe, Caleb said. Far from your reach. Your hospital board. I snapped. Your charity galas. You don't get to act helpless. Richard tapped the table twice. What do you want? Caleb's voice stayed calm. A boundary. Richard's eyes narrowed. Money. I felt my temper spike. hot and clean. I want my daughter alive. Richard held my gaze. Is she pregnant? The question landed like a slap. Caleb didn't blink. Yes. For the first time, Richard's composure cracked. His fingers flexed, and I saw a pulse jump in his throat. Not love. Calculation. I slid the second stack of papers across the table. Hopewell Foundation transfers. Shell companies. Offshore accounts. Margaret's signature on every approval. Richard stared at the first page. Then the second. He read like a man reading his own obituary. You're accusing Margaret of embezzlement. He said, I'm telling you what Lena found. I said, and I'm telling you why she got beaten for it. Richard leaned back. Slow. You could be lying. Caleb set a flash drive down like a small bullet. Verify it. Richard's eyes flicked to Caleb. Who are you? Caleb's smile was thin. The kind of family you didn't plan for. My stomach tightened. I didn't know it then. But that line would matter later. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, thumb hovering, then faced us again. Suppose I believe you, he said. What happens next? Caleb's voice went low. You already know. Public scandal. Richard said. Audits. Charges. My company dragged through mud, and my daughter dragged into a grave. I said. Richard's eyes flicked. Just once. To my skin. Then back to my face. Small. Almost polite. But I felt it. My voice stayed flat. Your wife called my family dirty blood. She said Lena didn't deserve to carry your grandchild. Richard's nostrils flared. Margaret is traditional. Caleb's hand hit the table. The cup rattled. Say that again, he said. Richard swallowed. I'm not excusing her. I leaned in. Then do something. Richard's mouth tightened. What are your demands? Divorce papers for Ethan and Lena. I said, full custody. A restraining order. A clean settlement. No quiet family counseling. And if live it, Richard's eyes narrowed. Ethan won't agree. The name Ethan twisted something inside me. I pulled out the burner phone and slid it across. The screen showed his text, bring her back. Mom can fix this. Richard stared. Color drained from his face. He knew. I said, Caleb spoke softly. He always knows. He just chooses her. Richard's voice came out rough. You have more. I opened the final folder. Photos. Statements. A hotel receipt. Margaret's hand on a younger man's back. Her wedding ring catching the light. Richard's stare went flat. Dead calm. Where did you get this? He asked. Does it matter? I said. You asked what we want. Now you know what we have. Richard didn't move for a long moment. Then he set the folder down. Careful. Like it might bite. If this goes public, he murmured, it destroys everyone. I let the silence stretch until it hurt. Not everyone. Just the people who thought they could bury us. Richard's eyes lifted. You think I'm your ally? The truth tasted bitter. No, I think you love your empire more than your wife. He didn't deny it. Caleb's voice was ice. Choose. Richard looked toward the window where the neon kept pulsing like a warning, then back at me. 3 days. He said, you'll have the papers. Margaret will leave. Ethan will be removed from the trust. And Lena, I asked. Richard held my gaze. Untouchable. Relief hit. Then anger right behind it. Not because she's right. I said, because she's a liability. Richard's expression didn't change. As we slid out of the booth, my knees felt weak, but my voice stayed steady. I leaned close enough that he could smell the smoke on my coat. You can call us dirty, I whispered, but you will never call us disposable again. Outside, the wind slapped my cheeks awake. Snow flurries spun in the parking lot, catching in my eyelashes. Caleb walked beside me, quiet, watchful. I didn't feel victorious. I felt changed, and somewhere deep in me, something cold settled into place, like a lock clicking shut. I didn't drive back to that cabin feeling like a hero. I drove back feeling like I'd put my hand on something rotten and realized it had been rotting for years. Lena was awake when we returned, propped on pillows, the kerosene lamp turning her bruises the color of old pennies. She studied my face like she could read the outcome in my breathing. "It's done," she asked. "It's moving." I said, 3 days. Divorce papers. Protection. Margaret leaves. Caleb set the briefcase on the table, then sat with his back to the window like an old habit he couldn't break. Lena let out a long breath. For half a second, her shoulders dropped, then her eyes hardened again. "And Ethan?" she asked. I hesitated. Not because I wanted to protect him, because I didn't want to be the one to say it out loud. "He's being removed from the trust." Caleb said, "Richard called it accountability." Lena gave a small, bitter laugh that didn't reach her face. Accountability. From a man who only moves when his empire is threatened. That was the part that sat in my throat. The truth we didn't want to admit. We hadn't won because the world suddenly got fair. We won because we found the pressure point. I pulled a folded paper from my coat pocket and placed it in Lena's hand. Richard also signed over a house. Not a favor. Not an apology. A strategic move. He wants the baby tied to his name, even if Ethan never earns the right to carry it. Lena stared at the paper like it was written in another language. "So I'm an asset," she whispered. "You're alive," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word. "And your baby is alive. That's what matters tonight." Her fingers trembled as she smoothed the paper flat. Then she looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment her grief turned into something sharper. "He knew," she said. "Ethan knew before, didn't he?" The cabin went quiet except for the stove popping and the wind pressing its cold mouth against the logs. Caleb didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. Lena's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She swallowed. Once, twice, like she was forcing the words back down so they couldn't drown her. "I built my life around being acceptable," she said, smiling right, speaking soft, staying grateful. "And he watched his mother poison me once and stayed quiet." My chest tightened so hard it felt like a fist. I didn't know it then. I said, "But this would matter later more than any bruise, because it wasn't just what Margaret did, it was what Ethan allowed." Caleb reached into his bag and slid a burner phone across the table. "No more old numbers. No more being tracked. We move smart from here." Lena nodded slowly, like she was learning to breathe in a new way. "And the proof?" she asked. I pulled out a second flash drive, smaller than my thumbnail, and placed it in her palm. "Copies. More than one. In more than one place. If anything happens to you, it doesn't disappear with you." Her jaw tightened. "So we're not done?" "No," I said. "We're just quiet, outside." The forest made its own promises in the dark. Branches scratching, owls calling, something moving that we couldn't see. They thought they had destroyed us. But they had just handed us the one weapon we needed all along. If you've ever felt invisible inside your own family, I want you to hear this part slowly. I am not telling this story to sound strong. I'm telling it because silence is how harm survives. Because so many women are taught that endurance is the same as virtue, and that keeping peace matters more than keeping themselves alive. What happened to my daughter did not begin in the woods. It began years earlier, in Pullet rooms, in swallowed words, in excuses made for men who never chose them. If you've ever been told to wait, to stay quiet, to be grateful while something inside you broke, you are not weak. You are surviving, and survival can turn into clarity. If this story touched something you don't usually name out loud, subscribe for the reminder that boundaries are not cruelty, and protecting your child is never wrong. This story isn't over.